Yu-Gi-Oh! I love Yu-Gi-Oh! I think alongside Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was one of my first childhood memories. For reference, I was starting school while the Duel Monsters series was being broadcast, so Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards were the cool thing at the playground. If you had the 3 Egyptian god cards, you were basically a god yourself. Even after the trading cards stopped being cool, they still showed the anime on TV in the time slot before I went to school, so I always kept a passing interest in it. It wasn't until about 2 years ago as of posting this video that I really got back into the series. It was nothing more than nostalgia that I wanted to watch Duel Monsters GX and 5Ds again, and it was those quiet nights surfing the web that I started to question something. Why the hell do I actually like this? All the anime series suck. Some people might attribute that to the fact that I watch most anime in dubs and this show was produced in that dark era of anime dubs, but no! It sucks! I fucking love it! So let me establish the premise for you by starting with the first spin-off show, Duel Monsters. The star of the show is Yugimoto going around playing cards with his friends, available at all good retailers, and wacky antics ensues from here. He owns an ancient puzzle which contains the spirit of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh that inhabits Yugi's body to help him in tricky situations, because what teenager hasn't imagined having another dude inside him? But alone, I don't mind the premise. It's mindless, but I expect mindless from anime. However, stupidity only really works if you acknowledge that you're stupid. Here, it's all very childish, but it gets weirdly dark in places that it really doesn't need to be. I swear, it's hard to count the amount of characters that come from broken homes. Giving these people a backstory is fine if you need to establish a character motivation, but if you were to ever to stumble on the wikia of this anime, it would be like looking through a psychiatrist's notebook. It's just weird having a character cry over how their father died or something, and then one of the supporting cast pipes up and talks about believing in yourself and the power of friendship, or insert equivalent bullshit here. The spin-off show Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is the most guilty of this. Not because it hammers the trope of friendship in any more than the other shows, but because the protagonist of 5Ds is just a total edgelord and it makes the contrast even weirder. In fact, he's such an edgelord, every time he smiles, all the supporting cast have a double take because they don't believe what they're seeing. This guy's main character trait is that he doesn't smile, and yet somehow, he isn't British. But I feel I'm getting ahead of myself, because this isn't a place exclusively to talk about the characters. We need to ship 5,000 of the Seto Kaiba structure decks by Monday! Lucky for us, they don't spend too much time focusing on the cards. By not having an established rule set, they can focus on the characters a lot more. Admittedly, it means the competitions make no sense and are impossible to follow correctly, but honestly, I grew to love the bullshit nature of these fights. They always throw something, one thing that completely flips the table in an inexplicable way that not only makes the show fairly unpredictable, but has also created some of my favourite moments in the series. A 3-headed dragon can't even destroy a wall of fuzzballs. Screw the legend of St. George, this is way more engaging. But it's thinking about moments like these that it gets me slightly upset, because from season 2 onwards, they started upselling the cards a lot more. They still keep the character moments in, but now on top of that, they have to constantly remind us what the pot of greed does. This means the pacing of the show moves from 30 miles an hour to 30 miles a century. They don't even get the card descriptions right half the time. But I know the reason for this, because now I'm going to tell you the origin of Duel Monsters. One day, a guy called Kazuka Takahashi wrote a manga about a boy who played with cards and called it Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone loved it. Then, the big bad businessman walked up to him and said, "Hey, we want to adapt your manga into a real trading card game in order to capitalize on the popularity of Magic the Gathering." To which Takahashi replied, "But I never intended a real card game to be made from my story. If you were to make a trading card game based off my manga, it would be incredibly unbalanced and very confusing." "What was that? You give us full permission to do what we want with your intellectual property? Thanks, buddy." And thus started one of the biggest trading card games in the world. Every year, people around the globe compete to find out whose laser printed pieces of cardboard are the best of the best, and we can finally decide, once and for all, who is the true King of the Virgins. God, just look at this room, it's like Dracula's wet dream. However, when we go into the show, the story they provide is a little more interesting. You see, 5,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians had the shadow games in which sorcerers would try to summon the most powerful monster they could, with the loser having their souls lost to the shadow realm. Don't question how these monsters and sometimes literal gods were later trapped inside 4-inch tall pieces of cardboard, you'll just give yourself a headache. Cut to the modern day, where anyone who carries with them one of 7 ancient Egyptian millennium items can then play a game in the shadow realm Realm and fight for their souls there. Now, technically it's not a requirement to play a children's card game in the Shadow Realm. I'm fairly sure you can play any kind of competition, but with the exception of one time in the Duel Monsters series, it is always a card game. Now, in the Shadow Realm, the game makes sense. The monsters have physical form, so it will play out like a monster fight. What doesn't make sense is how the characters can somehow feel pain outside of a Shadow game. Even though most of these fights are done with holograms or augmented reality, how the hell do they still create wind to knock people over? It's well established that with the exception of special cards, none of these holograms have physical forms until we get to the 5th spin-off show, so unless the definition of hologram was changed to giant fucking kaiju monster while I wasn't looking, I'm calling a bit of Blizzardy bullshit. I wouldn't bring it up, but there's this really big moment halfway through Season 1 of Duel Monsters where Yugi's rival stands on top of the edge of a high building and says if Yugi attacks with his card, it would kill him, basically forcing Yugi to surrender. It's a real big moment until you remember, they're fighting with holograms and in any normal world, he would be completely fine. And honestly, he should have killed him. If he's so stupid to think that would work, it's pretty much natural selection by this point. And I've been harsh on Duel Monsters, but don't think I'm not going to address the later spin-off shows. GX is set as a kind of sequel, but it changed the tone just a tad. For one, we get a new main character, Jaden. And how would I describe Jaden? Well, Jaden is your average high school student, except more punchable. God, do I hate his voice. In fact, I hate most of the GX dub voices. In Duel Monsters, the voice actors weren't exactly well directed, but at the very least they had iconic voices that were instantly recognizable and somewhat enjoyable. Except Rebecca Hawkins. I don't usually condone child murder, but go full force on this girl. In GX, they're still recognizable, but not because you want them to be. Basically, do the stupidest voice you can imagine right now, and that character will probably appear in GX.
Girls, just what on earth is going on down there?
Sorry to disappoint, but your attack didn't even scratch my satellite.
You may think that's where it's safest, but it's not.
Now you get to summon a werewolf monster! But if I were you, I wouldn't celebrate just yet, you sticky diaper face!
And of course, these voices are the results of decisions by the dubbing company 4Kids, who are somewhat infamous with their reputation. If you expect to get a good translation, frankly you could get a more accurate reading from a pack of tarot cards. I don't mind that they were changing things when they adapted it. Certain liberties do have to be made, but the audio mixing especially took a real hit. If you want to change the sound effects, I'll let you, but when you have a giant skeleton dragon, it should not be given the sound effect of a bald eagle. But any hate I do give 4Kids is honestly just exaggerating for the sake of trying to be funny. They were just doing their job, and being frank, the voice direction did get better as each spin-off show went deeper into the story. And in all honesty, there is one thing that 4Kids did that by far deserves way more credit. The naming convention of their characters. This is something that can be seen throughout most of 4Kids' work, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Really took things one step further in my opinion. Take this character. He's only in the show for one episode, and his key trait is that he's a good dancer. What do you think his name is? It's Johnny Steps. How beautifully on the nose is that? And so many characters are like that. My favourite has to be this guy who's a famous movie star. His name? Jean-Claude Magnum. How can you not fall in love with someone who came up with the name Jean-Claude Magnum? And there are so many examples to go off. In all honesty, if you want to make an RPG or a Dungeons & Dragons campaign and you need a really badass name, just take anything from the 4Kids Yu-Gi-Oh! Dub. Let me give you some examples to whet your taste buds. I might be cheating with some of these, but fuck it, it's funny. Aster Phoenix, Bolt Tanner, Zane Truesdale, Mako Tsunami, Maximilian Pegasus, Hunter Pace, Rex Raptor, Duke Devlin, and Jack Atlas. Jack Atlas is what a serial killer would call their penis. I fucking love it. But something I'm not quite as in love with is the tone of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Where Duel Monsters was a little more serious but had equal measures of childish shenanigans, GX is a lot more tongue-in-cheek. Honestly, this isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, I prefer Yu-Gi-Oh! When it's being self-aware because no matter how you cut it, this concept is fucking stupid. The problem GX has is not that the tone is bad, but it's inconsistent. Even though I didn't like the contrast Duel Monsters went for, I always knew what I was going to expect. With GX, sometimes it wants to be a generic high school anime, but sometimes it wants to be edgy. Maybe sometimes it will want to parody itself. It has the focus of a broken camera, and you never know what you're going to get each episode. But no matter what tone it goes for, it's always accompanied by its iconic 4Kids theme song. The theme definitely mirrors that of a high school anime, but when it comes to those points when the show wants to take itself seriously, it doesn't work because they often create really big, decisive moments with characters' lives at stake, but then the episode will end and the theme song will stop playing, so suddenly, the only thing you can think about is chilling out with your crew in the schoolyard. Also in GX, just so you know even more that they're not Duel Monsters, they don't have the shadow games anymore. Well, I mean they do, but only for a season. I'm fairly certain after Duel Monsters, they went on to make a new flavour of bullshit each season. Whether that be draining away duel energy, a cult of light worshippers, or a radiation-possessed demigod, you have no idea what they're going to throw at you. But I've talked shit enough, so let me balance it out with something more positive. I really like the character designs. I'll ignore Noah Kaiba exists because no villain should ever be wearing tennis shorts, and I could spend an entire day talking about how their hair looks like some kind of exotic fruit dropped on an artist palette, but other than that, they do look pretty good. Although I don't know what's quite up with Cyrus. It's like the character designer was really self-conscious about the Asian stereotype, so he compensated by giving him unnaturally large eyes. And I know larger eyes are expected of all cartoon characters, it's supposed to make them cute, but come on! How useful are those glasses? Although if you want a design that goes way too far, look no further than Paradox from the Bonds Beyond Time movie. Guess how many of his parents loved him? Although to be fair, Paradox is by far not the worst thing in this film. The only other Yu-Gi-Oh movie before this was The Pyramid of Light, and while even the Yu-Gi-Oh fandom don't really like it, it at least had a semi-coherent story. Bonds Beyond Time is the worst thing I can think of, and I am including the Holocaust in that poll. It pretty much takes the worst aspects of the entire series and puts all the focus on those parts. Unnecessary long flashback sequences, multiple Deus Ex Machinas, characters randomly doubting themselves just to force in a talk about friendship, and the worst aspect of all, the protagonist from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. So I offhandedly mentioned earlier how the main protagonist Yusei is a bit of an edgelord. In fact, he's so edgy, if you touched his hair, you might cut yourself. I think 5Ds wanted to have itself taken more seriously this time around after the somewhat mixed reception of GX. Don't get me wrong, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been serious and pulled it off a good few times, making its protagonist seem a lot more sympathetic. The difference here, all the 5Ds protagonists are annoying as fuck! They just won't stop complaining. It's like the dialogue was stolen from a blog post that has exactly 2 followers. The 4 main heroes all have a dark backstory to tell, but the key word there is back. It's their backstory. It should not be the forefront of their character, but so often there's one event in their past define everything about their personality. As a good example of how to do serious well, take Joey Wheeler from Duel Monsters. His motive behind entering the Duelist Kingdom tournament was to win the prize money and pay for his sister's medical bills, but the fact that he wanted to save his sister didn't define his character. He could joke and goof off occasionally. Dare I say, he even smiled every so often. Cut to a few years later watching Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds where the average episode plays out like, my best friend betrayed me. The world rejects me because I'm different. The fairy world is dying. My life is pain. I'm going to listen to the Birthday Massacre to make myself feel better. I wanted to go see them live, but my parents wouldn't let me. My mum's such a bitch. And while I'm discussing character, something has to be said about the dynamic each character has between each other. More specifically, the fact that there is none. The story is set up like a group of chosen ones, which really, you can make your own judgment on, but what that means is you create the situation where several characters who barely know each other have to work together. Have you ever been on a team building course for work or school? Have you ever felt like you became closer with the people you were working with? No! Of course you haven't! No one does! And this show displays that point perfectly. There's a lot more to building a team than just having the same objective, but at least with team building exercises, they know that the bare minimum thing you have to do is to collect everyone in the same place. 5Ds can't do that because this character Jack is too snobby to talk to anyone, and this character Akiza has a backstory which means she shuts herself off from the rest of the world. The story tries more to establish a dynamic between one protagonist and a single antagonist, but they fucked that up as well because they forgot to give this character Luna someone to fight, so come episode 46 where some guy called Divac appears and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm here. Also, I'm threatening." Oh no, I'm scared for some reason. Oh, and on the subject of the villains, they suck too. They don't even establish they exist until halfway through the first season, so they don't really have enough time to build them up because they're trying to establish 5 of them at once. You would think in the time they spent not building up the protagonists, they might have done something right with the villains, but nope. 2 of them are good. The rest are kind of crap if I'm honest. They did spend a lot of time on world building. I mean, it's way too much world building, but you know, it's half a positive. The The story is basically light versus dark in the most blatant fashion, and bizarrely, the edgelord main characters are on the light side. The dark side are even edgier. They all wear robes, have sick tattoos symbolizing they've been in prison, even though some of them haven't been in prison, but whatever. They even have an edgy catchphrase. Whenever they summon a strong monster, they say, "When the shadows are devoured by even darker shadows, the curtain pulls back and reveals a world without light." My god, are you trying too hard? Also, they duel on motorcycles now. Yeah, sure, why not? You've done trains, blimps, and helicopters. I'm pretty sure in time you'll be dueling on ski lifts. And this shit is all the same as before. The sound design and rules of the game have slightly improved, but it's all the same problem. Bad voice direction, odd character choices, and still way too much backstory. There are some really good concepts here, but they try to establish way too much in not enough time. And bear in mind, I'm watching this series with rose-tinted glasses. What the hell am I gonna think with the next spin-off show? But let's take the dive. This is Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, and
If life is a game, they say I can't win.
guys, you know how some people identify as straight, gay, bisexual, and all that? I'm Yuki-sexual. I wanna fuck Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. Holy shit, this show is phenomenal! This is like the stupidest parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, but done right! Done so right! They finally realized playing a card game to save the world was stupid, and now they're just rolling with it. This is cheesy in the best way possible. But it still feels like Yu-Gi-Oh! Transdimensional aliens instead of Egyptians, but fuck, this is beautiful! Look how colourful it is! Look how much the animation has improved! Look at this cast of characters! I want figures of all of them! Okay, so, in case you couldn't tell, I really like Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. I find it a shame that the wider community don't share my appreciation for it, because it does away with a lot of the worst tropes the show famously committed before. Not to mention, there's so much more charm and personality to this series than any other spin-off show prior. The main cast are fun and bounce off each other. The villains are goddamn delicious. Even the side characters do stuff sometimes, including the female ones, and for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, that's a damn well revolution. I mean, I know some people don't like it because it's childish, but it's fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Guys, of course it's childish. But now I'm going to drop the act and get a little bit serious for a second. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a very special series to me. My dad still complains to me about dragging him to see the Pyramid of Light movie. I still haven't apologized, and honestly, I don't intend to. All these series, even at their worst, are to some extent enjoyable enough. I haven't yet jumped into Vrains, and I've only recently started Arc 5, but you know what? I'm gonna watch them all, and I'll probably watch them again. I'll admit that the shows are kind of crap, and if you aren't already into it, you're gonna find it hard to start enjoying, but if you do muscle through enough episodes to reach the enjoyment point, you might be lucky enough to become trash like me. Sorry, did I just say the enjoyment point? I meant the point of no return. And it's through the shows that I started collecting cards again. Because that's all these shows are. Product placement. There's always new decks and booster packs, and most of them all appear in the shows. The Dark Side of Dimensions movie is particularly guilty by reprinting cards and playing off your nostalgia of Duel Monsters, but fucking hell, it worked. And for those of you harassing me for spending way too much money on my many thousands of cards, don't think so harsh of me. I've also spent a lot of money on card sleeves. Don't want my laser printed pieces of paper to get damaged now, would I? I still love Yu-Gi-Oh! In all forms of media. I played it with friends at school, I found friends at college who played it, and even though my closest friends don't live near me anymore, on those rare occasions that we do see each other face to face, we almost always play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, if you excuse me, I have something to do. I swear it's worth the money!